Hello guys, so this video is about Firebase UI. That's how to implement this UI login provided by Firebase UI in your React application. So basically, we'll be creating a React application. We'll create a Firebase project, and then we'll see how we could implement this Firebase UI by using the Firebase UI package. So in case you don't know, Firebase is a product provided by Google to make handling the back end easier or completely eliminate the need of a back end. So this Firebase, the project is going to handle the authentication for us, handle the users for us, handle signing in, signing up for us, handle sign out for us, and all that. So now I'm in Visual Studio Code. So we'll simply be creating our React app. Create React app in our root folder. So installation of React is done. Next thing, we need to install some packages. So npm install Firebase and FirebaseUi. So I think installation of that is done. So next thing is to start building a project. So we can begin by removing the unnecessary packages from here. So here we can just clear this from here. I think we are done with this. Then we don't need to go. We can simply add from React. I think that's all we need from the app file. App.css file. We can simply just clear this. It's going to be a simple application we'll be building rather. Here we can maybe leave this, we can delete this logo, and I think we are set. So now I'm at the Firebase console. I simply go to console.firebase.google.com, and then we simply click on create a project. Now this is going to be the name of your project, and this should be unique, so I'll call this Firebase. I think this name is available. Simply Firebase Auth. Yeah, so we can go with this. Simply accept the term. Yep, I confirm this. Then continue. We don't need Google Analytics, so we can turn it off. Simply create project. It's going to take a couple of seconds. So once it's done, I'll be back. So I think it's done. So we simply continue. So the first thing we want to do is to initialize the Firebase app. So we simply go to project settings. So going to project settings, we simply come through your apps right here. So click on web. So what this is going to do is to give us some credentials, right? That we use to authenticate to Firebase and tell Firebase that here is actually us that is trying to authenticate to the console from our application. So we'll simply do this by simply we'll give a nickname, call it maybe front end. We are not going to host anything, so we can simply register app, I think, after a few seconds. So now it's simply giving us the instruction of what to do on how to that is making use of the SDK to access the Firebase. So we've already done it. We've installed npm Firebase. So next thing is just to copy this. I think we can just copy this as it is, or maybe just here. So now back in Visual Studio Code, we simply paste this here. We can simply cut this out. We are simply bringing the Firebase here. So paste this. I think we can remove these comments. So this is already initialized by Firebase for us. It's already giving us the API key, API domain, auth domain, and all that, and simply calling on initialize to simply contact Firebase and tell Firebase that via the SDK that we are the ones trying to access the application. So next thing we'll be doing now is to create the Google Auth UI, the Google Auth UI component. So in our SRC folder, I'll simply create a file. I'll name it Auth Google. You can name this whatever you like, of course. Google Auth Google JS. So this is the name of the component. So here what we'll be doing in this folder is simply to bring in the Google UI. and from here we are going to set up the Google UI, set up the authentication method one. That's if you want to make use of just simple email and password sign up. You want to make use of maybe Facebook to redirect to Facebook and sign up via Facebook and things like that. But what this video is simply going to cover is using simple email. Once we are done with that, you can simply go through documentations. I think it's easy from there to grab how to authenticate through Facebook and other social media links. So we'll simply now bring in import all as Firebase UI from Firebase UI. So we'd also need to bring in the CSS file provided to us by Firebase UI. This will automatically style the component for us, the authentication component for us on the page. So we'll simply bring in import from Firebase UI this folder and Firebase UI CS. In case you're wondering where I got this from, it's on the documentation. I'll link I'll keep a link on to the documentations of Firebase UI in the description sections below. So from here, then I think we are done with everything we need to import. So now another thing we would need to do now before starting is to make use of the use effect hook. I'll be explaining why we'll be using the use effect hook later on after initializing it. So right here in the use effect, simply do this. So right here in the use effect hook, we'll simply be creating a constant. We'll name this UI. So Firebase auth UI dot get instance new. So what this is simply going to do for us is to firstly check if we have and it's going to get the instance. To call this method and check if we have this instance already set up. And if you are familiar with the way React works, it always rain down when these changes in the props or in the states. So what this use effect is simply going to do is, if this is already on the screen, if this is already on the screen, if this get instance returns a true value, then it's going to follow and it's not going to call on a new method to initialize a new Firebase UI. So if this is false, then the next thing we'll do is auth. I think it's called auth UI. Auth UI, if I'm correct. Okay, I'm missing something. Auth.firebase.auth UI. I will simply calling the initialize app. Remember, I will be initializing the app from here. And if remember, I mentioned that we'll be passing this initialize app to this component when we put it in the app component here. So we'll simply we are expecting it on props.auth. Next thing we'll be doing is to call on this UI.start. Now what it's simply going to do is to mount the auth screen, to the authentication component on the screen. So we simply pass what we'll be calling, because it will target what this is simply going to target a simple div on the screen. Say this is a div now. We can simply call class rather, and simply call it say Firebase auth, maybe Firebase auth container. So it's simply going to target this on the screen before mounting. So simply, let me see what is happening here. Class name, maybe put this here. So we're all set here. So we're simply going to put this also here. Let's start. And then we'll simply pass in the options container. So now we'll simply go to the Firebase UI document. Let me quickly show you for the options container. for the object container. Now this is documentation for the Firebase UI. It gives us a lot of options. There are so many options you can set here, as you can see. Different parameters you can set in the options container here. For maybe you want to use OAuth for Facebook, OAuth for Twitter, and so on and so forth. So this documentation, but we are simply going to be using email and simple email and password sign up, as I mentioned earlier. I'll link this in the description in case you want to explore setting up other OAuth providers like I say GitHub, Twitter, and so on. For the meantime, we head back to Visual Studio Code and we simply set the options. Now, the first thing the option takes in is first sign in options. Now, sign in options is for different options. Maybe we want them Facebook authentication, we want Twitter authentication. This is where we put it. It's going to accept a single array which accepts objects. Now, the first thing we'll bring is calling provider, and the provider we want to be making use of is Firebase. Don't have Firebase in yet. Okay, then we have to bring in Firebase from Firebase. So we call Firebase. We want on auth. We want email. Something's wrong. Firebase. Okay. Oh, so Firebase, not just Firebase. Would have Firebase app. From the documentation, this is what we are supposed to call on for the signing option, to get the signing option. So auth email auth provider, and then provider ID. Now say you want to initialize maybe a Facebook auth provider. It's pretty the same process here. So come here, base auth Facebook auth provider ID. So depends on what you want. So we are simply going to make use of the simple email. So the next thing is we need to add a flag to require display name. So maybe when the user is signing up, you want the user to provide them a display name, and we don't want that since it's going to be very simple. Simply set this as false. So say you want other signing methods, you quickly provide it as an object here, as I mentioned earlier. So next things to call on after the signing options is to say, okay, we have to pass in sign in success URL. So this is going to be like after you authenticate successfully, what URL do you want to navigate to? After Google signs you or verifies your username and password successfully, or after signing you up successfully, where do you want to go to next? This is what this URL is here for. So I'll simply pass / authenticated, if I'm correct. Yep. Then you can also pass a privacy and policy URL. So if you have a privacy and policy URL, you can pass it here, say, so that once the user clicks on to check your privacy policies, so you can simply put that here, your URL, whatever URL we have set up. And then I think we are done with that. Yep. So we don't also want this to keep running every time, so we simply pass as the use effect hook works. The only dependency, this is depending on is props.auth. So only when this changes, prop, if I can get it correctly, .auth. So this is the only dependency that this is going to be making use of. So I think we are done. Maybe we can test it out now. So I'll simply run npm run dev. Let's see if we get npm run start rather. So it's loading the server. So it's done. Now back to my browser. Simply localhost 3000. Okay, blank page. Okay. So I think I see the reason why we have a blank page. We don't have the Firebase app initialized here. So Firebase from Firebase const slash app, if I'm correct here. So then we are not supposed to call just initialize app here. We're simply going supposed to call firebase dot initialize app. I don't think we need this since we're already initializing the app. And then right here, I think we have it available on props.auth. Yeah, props.auth. So we simply make it available here and simply call the instance to get the authenticated instance of, yeah. So we can check it out on our browser here. And as you can see, we already have it on the screen. So think we are good to go. So I think the next thing we do is now, how do we know when the user has signed in, signed up successfully, or is signed out? So Firebase still gives us another means of doing this. Now we are in the app file, and then we simply call, there's a method provided to us by, we'll make use of the use effect hook first. Use effect hook here, and then right here. So Firebase provides us a method we can use to check the authenticated state of the user. So from Firebase auth. Now the name of this method I think is called on auth state changed, correct? And then we call it in the use effect hook. Auth state change, correct? So the first parameter this function takes is going to be the authenticated Firebase instance. Firebase dot auth also, and then second argument is going to take in a callback which is going to receive the user object. So we can do whatever we want with this object. Say we console log the user, but we don't want to stop there. So we want to have to take over from here. So we simply call on use state. So simply define a new state, const user set user, and we simply call maybe use state hook, and from here accepting an object, say username or whatever, empty, and then here, so think it's available on, so if we say set user, come here and say maybe email, email is going to be user, I think it's available on user dot email, yeah, it's giving us auto completion, and maybe we can give all the user the UID of the person's Google UID. So user dot UID, so unique ID user. What else do we have left? Okay, instead of user we have email here, then UID. The reason we are doing this is going to become clearer when we set up the page we want to redirect to after successfully authenticating. But meantime we're just storing this here. So save this, and then hopefully we check it on the browser and hope everything checks out. So I'm going to refresh the page, and I'm in my right here. Say we want to create a new user called test.test@test.com, not found. So we have an error. So I think I have pretty much idea where we're having this error. So in the Firebase project we created earlier, I think we need to set up the database we want to make use of. So we'll come into the database for the users we need to set up. We'll come to authentication. We'll come through get started, and then you select a provider. So as I mentioned earlier, you could create them. Users could sign up with Google, Facebook, TikTok, and their profiles and others, even phone numbers. So you can just set up maybe email and password, which is what we are using, and we enable it. And we don't need passwordless link, and then authorized domains, local hosts, because that's for the probably cause issues, to prevent cause issues from happening. So and things like that. So we can simply say save from here, and then we see enabled. I think if we try it, we'll get a different response now. Very refresh test.test@test.com. Now we say next. You can see since this is a new email, it's asking for a password. Create a new email, and then you see it's redirecting to the authenticated route we set earlier right here. So, and if we refresh this, if we come to users, we'll have a list of the user right here. So next thing I think we need to do is to set up the authenticated page. So meanwhile, to set up the authenticated page, we are going to need React Router DOM to mimic a multi-page application, so that we can set up authentication so that you can't access a particular page if you're not appropriately authenticated. So we simply npm I react router DOM and hit enter. So the installation of that is done. So we'll come back to that later on. So in the src folder, we are simply going to create that route, authenticated, right, and simply call this. So right here now we can see we create a span. Yeah. Okay, create say div rather. So create a span. Yeah. So maybe we'll call this user email. We also have another span here. So this is where the email, after authentication, this is where the email will be passed through, and this is where to be displayed. And maybe we can also get the UID. Maybe we'll put another span here. This is where the UID is going to be. Now we are going to get through this from props, and then we'll also add some styling later on to this. So back in our app, now remember I mentioned this on auth state chain is going to be fired off anytime we have a change in users authentication states. So we have the user here. Remember we have the user, we have a lot of things present in this user. So you can email, let me just display name, token metadata, photo URL, the URL of the profile photo, refresh token, UID, and all that. So whatever you want, you can get on the user's object here. So, and as soon as we're getting the user, and once this is fired off, we get to set the user at email, user.email, and the UID at user.id. Now what we can do is to bring in, since we set up React Router DOM, right, we can simply bring in import. If you're used to React, this is nothing new. React Router DOM. So we can bring in browser router, and we'll need route. So if you're initial, we made use of switch instead of route. So I also have a video. Hopefully I remember to link it in the video. I'll link it in the description rather. I have a video on React Router version, the latest version. So you can watch that if you're not used to the latest version. So since we have the browser router set up, we can simply bring the router here, browser router, engage here. Then now dynamically we can check if we have user.email. So we are setting up a page guard. You want route here this way, and then we have route here again for the first page. That's for the authenticated page. Okay, for the authenticated page. So path, we need to have authenticated here, because that's the page we're going to redirect to after successfully authenticating. And the element we want to bring in is simply going to be so. And if we don't have this here, so what we are saying is if user if the email is not present, if this state is not set in user.email, we are going to bring in the auth Google for authentication. But if it's set, we are going to navigate to the authenticated page. Now here, the authenticated page, we want to have props.email here, and we want to have props.id. I think that's what I set it as. Props.uid. So here, or rather, let me just pass the entire user object here. So user. So the entire user state is passed here. So props.user mail user ID. So I think we should be done with everything, and hopefully it works out. So we can start the server again. It should be npm run start. So the server is running. Now back to the browser. I'll refresh this. So now we have the email as expected because we are authenticated already, and the UID. Why is this blank? Let's check it out. Oh, that's because I'm setting ID here. So we can just do this. Now back to the browser, and you can see we have the UID here. So we sure can add some styling. One other thing we need to set up is signing out, because if you've observed, each time we refresh on the page, it doesn't clear the state whatsoever, because I think because it's stored on the browser. These details are stored on the browser. So to clear the browser and sign out appropriately, we can simply do this. Create a button. I think we can create a button here. Maybe div for the purpose of styling. Create a button here. Add an on click. Close it appropriately. Say sign out. Maybe here we need to pass a function that will be called. So to sign out, Firebase gives us an option here. Firebase.auth, and on it to call sign out. So with this, we should be able to sign out appropriately. So also upon signing out, remember we are depending on the state to know which page to be redirected to. So on the on auth state change, we can simply, what we can do is to check for the user email or whatever we want to check for. Say if user.email, do this, and else, just to ensure we clear the state and we don't see stale data. So with this, I think we should be able to sign out appropriately. Maybe also we can add some styling. We can also add some styling to this authenticated page. Say class name container background color. Say this, and give it a width, fit content, margin, auto. Also wanted to do this earlier, so I think we can check it right now. As you can see, we have this, and let's test the sign out first. I think it's done, it's just not. So upon sign out, it's not actually redirecting. So we need to find a way to redirect this after signing out. Because when we log in, let me log in again. So we're here now. Never. We sign out, but it's not redirecting until we refresh the page. So we can do that. We can correct that. Actually, it's supposed to work. Oh, I see. We are checking for user.email. It should just be user. We're checking for the user object entirely. We're checking for the user. If there is a user object, this is what we should check for. Which means we are supposed to clear this. Simply do this. That's all. So hopefully it works through now. Back to the browser, we simply refresh. Test at test.com. Test 1 2 3 4. Yeah, we are done. Sign out, and it's working appropriately now. So I think that's that. We've covered sign in, sign out, and sign up. We've covered everything that needs to be done. Of course, you can add some more styling to this as you please. So I think that's that. We've covered the major things. We've covered signing up. We've covered signing in. We've covered sign out. We've covered sign up, and so on. So remember, I mentioned that you have other means of authenticating. Also, you could also make use of Facebook profile. You could make use of your Google profile. You could make use of GitHub profile. Whatever you like. It's pretty the same process, just a few tweaks here and there. You could add your privacy policy, and that's that. So now a couple of notes to take. Normally in your application you want to expose your API keys and all this, so you can use environmental variables to store this. I think that takes care of that. And also I mentioned I'll be explaining why we had to put this in the use effect hook. Now Firebase UI, normally when this is going to be mounted on the page, it's going to be initialized on the page, it's going to look for this particular ID, particular class name, and so that is where it's going to target to mount this on. Now if you don't put this on use effect, the implication of this is that once this page is going to be loaded, then it's going to look for this and it's not going to find it, because most likely this is going to be rendered as it is, as if you're used to React. You know that you don't anything that causes side effects on your page, you don't put them on, you have to put them on the use effect hook and make sure they run after the component has been mounted. So that's why we have to put the use effect hook here, and so on. So remember I mentioned that you have other means of authenticating. Also, you could also make use of Facebook profile. You could make use of your Google profile. You could make use of GitHub profile. Whatever you like. It's pretty the same process, just a few tweaks here and there. You could add your privacy policy, and that's that. So I'll be having a video also that will, instead of making use of Firebase UI, you could also set up your own form and call some Firebase function for sign up and sign in if you don't intend on making use of Firebase UI. You want to make your own UI. Although I think there's a documentation also that shows how you could modify the Firebase UI to suit you. But if you want to explore setting up your own sign up page from scratch, so I'll also make a video on that very soon. So stay tuned. Alright, I think that's pretty much about that. If you have any questions about the video, you can leave in the comment section below. Would appreciate if you subscribe to the channel, and thanks for watching. Goodbye.